The Flood from Halo. The Flood is a parasitic life form that first appears in Halo Combat Evolved and quickly establishes itself as the franchise's existential boogeyman. At its core, the Flood is an all-consuming infection that hijacks any sentient creature with sufficient biomass, rewriting the host's cells and nervous system in minutes. An infected body becomes a shambling combat form that still remembers how to use guns, vehicles, and tactics, so every fallen soldier instantly bolsters the Flood's ranks. Smaller infection forms, think leash-sized spores with teeth, swarm battlefields in clouds, burrow into flesh, and pilot the corpse from the inside. As the parasite spreads, it links individual hosts into a single intellect. Once enough biomass is gathered, these neural threads coalesce into a gravemind, an enormous, subterranean brain capable of star-level strategy and chillingly eloquent speech. A mature gravemind can steer entire fleets of captured ships, manipulate Forerunner technology, and devise galaxy-wide war plans. Worse, it absorbs memories along with bodies, so every tactical secret the Covenant or UNSC ever knew becomes Flood property. The Flood consists of various specialized forms. The most basic Flood forms are the infection forms, which come in various types and infect hosts by hijacking their bodies and nervous systems. Infected hosts then undergo a rapid series of transformations, becoming lethal combat forms, and combat forms are used to subdue and secure additional hosts for infection. And once they have outlived their usefulness as warriors, they transform into carrier forms, spreading the Flood by spreading more infection forms. And once the Flood has amassed enough bodies to create a gravemind, it is capable of generating pure forms, which are created solely from assimilated nutrients and biomass. Pure forms observed during the outbreak in late 2552 were able to spontaneously mutate between three configurations: Stalker, Tank, and Ranged forms, although in practice, the true extent of their mutability is impossible to effectively catalog. And millions of years before humanity's rise, the ancient Forerunners realized containment was impossible. If left unchecked, the Flood would consume every sentient species and cover the galaxy into a single, ravenous organism. Their desperate solution was the Halo Array, 7 ring-walled superweapons calibrated to wipe out all life with sufficient neural complexity, starving the Flood of hosts in one cataclysmic pulse. Days Gone Zombies. They are called freakers, humans and animals, wrapped by an engineered prion virus that first swept the Pacific Northwest and then the world. Unlike classic corpses, freakers are alive. They breathe, bleed, heal minor wounds, and even hibernate in frigid weather. The virus hyper-accelerates metabolism and aggression while sharply lowering pain sensitivity, creating pack-hunting predators that can sprint, climb, and leap across broken terrain as fast as any healthy adult. And because the pathogen thrives in warmth and moisture, freakers roost in dark, humid nests by day and pour out in terrifying numbers after sunset. The infection reshapes hosts along whatever physiological lines best serve the horde. Swarmers are the wiry baseline, attacking in dozens or merging into hordes, rolling crowds hundreds strong that migrate along set feeding routes and can topple fences or buses through sheer weight. Newts. They are infected children, skitter across rooftops, and only pounce when victims are wounded, leveraging their small size for ambushes. And there are breakers, balloon with muscle mass and bone density, turning into 2-meter battering rams that shrug off assault rifle fire, while screamers evolve an oversized larynx that unleashes a sonic wail capable of stunning prey and summoning every freaker within earshot. Wildlife isn't spared either. There are virus-ridden wolves, called runners, and bears called ragers that add feral speed and brute force to the ecosystem's collapse. The freakers feed, rest, and migrate like real animals, which means the threat landscape changes by hour and by season. Human factions such as neuroscientists hint that the virus is still evolving, as later-stage freakers show coordinated pack tactics and rudimentary tool use, suggesting intelligence could be on the rise. The Crust. Crust began as a 2008 creator-owned comic by writer Garth Ennis and artist Jason Burrows, then expanded into multiple miniseries like Family Values and Badlands and Plus 100. The outbreak starts when a mysterious pathogen sweeps the globe in days. Victims developed a weeping, cross-shaped rash over their faces, hence the nickname the Crust. Unlike zombies, the infected are very much alive. Their brains are simply rewired to erase empathy and crank every violent or sexual impulse to maximum. Incubation takes seconds and transmission comes from any bodily fluid, and there is no cure, which means society collapses almost overnight. The Crust retain full intelligence. They drive cars, shoot guns, plan ambushes, and because they feel no pain, they will mutilate themselves if it helps torment a victim. The plague isn't about fearing or survival, it's about indulging every taboo urge. That sadism turns traditional run from the horde horror into something far more personal. Survivors must hide not only from mass attacks, but also from small, cunning packs that set elaborate traps or infiltrate refugee camps through deception. And later arcs introduce smarter Crust like Smokey, who can delay his impulses long enough to organize armies, and Crust plus 100, which jumps a century forward to show how humans eke out medieval level existences while the planet remains a playground for the infected. And the series never offers a miracle cure or heroic finale. Its bleak power lies in suggesting that once the Crust virus appears, humanity's only long-term choices are isolation, rigid tribalism, or eventual absorption into an endless carnival of cruelty. The Sadness Zombies. In the Taiwanese shock horror movie, the undead archetype is replaced by victims of the Alvin virus, a once benign flu that suddenly mutates. The new strain links the brain's aggression and libido centers, flipping every ethical switch to off. Incubation is almost instant. One droplet of blood or saliva, and eventually airborne particles, can turn a commuter into a smiling butcher within seconds, and white eyes with weeping black tears announce the change. But the real horror is this: the infected stay fully aware of their atrocities, even expressing grief as they laugh and murder. Once flipped, the bloodthirsty sadists unleash fantasies straight out of humanity's ID. They speak, reason, use weapons, and coordinate attacks, but every choice is steered toward maximum cruelty. A virologist in the film likens the compulsion to resisting a blink, and that urge builds until violence becomes inevitable. Containment proves futile. Soldiers, police, and even the president of Taiwan succumb on live television, turning state response into free-fire bedlam. Every fresh massacre sprays viral fluid onto bystanders, and failed quarantines merely bottle victims with new sadists who now mock them over loudspeakers. There's no cure in sight, and the pathogen's rapid evolution implies an imminent, global-scale pandemonium, a world where every remaining human faces an enemy that can sprint, scheme, and worst of all, enjoy every second of the carnage it creates. The Walking Dead Zombies. The undead, usually called walkers, aren't spread by a single bite-borne pathogen the way many pop culture zombies are. Instead, every living human already carries the mysterious infection. When someone dies from any cause, they reanimate unless the brain is destroyed. A walker's bite is still lethal, but only because the wound becomes septic or hemorrhagic and kills the victim, after which they inevitably turn. Reanimation can take as little as a minute or as long as several hours. Physically, walkers are slow, uncoordinated, and driven solely by basic sensory cues, mostly sound and to a lesser extent sight and smell. They have no need to breathe or rest, so they claw at barriers until limbs shear off or bones break. Destroying the brain with a headshot, a skull crush, or blade through the temple is the only sure way to stop them. And although one walker is manageable, the real danger lies in numbers and herd behavior. Gunfire or shouting can draw dozens, then hundreds, into migrating masses that sweep across open ground like a tidal wave. And survivors sometimes mask themselves in walker guts or blood to fool that primitive sense of smell. And over time the series shows walkers decaying, skeletal jaws, missing limbs, or liquefied organs, yet still functional. And later seasons and spin-offs introduce rare variant walkers that can climb, open doors, or even sprint for short bursts, hinting the pathogen may be mutating. The Last of Us Zombies. What most people call zombies are actually living humans overtaken by the cordyceps brain infection, a mutated strain of the rearward fungus Ophiocordyceps. Once spores or a bite introduce the pathogen, it hijacks the host nervous system in hours, flooding the brain with mycelium that drives the victim into a murderous rage while keeping basic motor functions intact. And because the infected are still technically alive, their bodies don't rot away like classic undead, giving them a longer operational lifespan and the stamina of a living predator. And as the fungus spreads, the host's physiology and behavior change in distinct stages. Freshly churned runners retain human speed and agility, swarming prey in packs, and within weeks, fungal plates erupt under the skin, muting cognition and creating stalkers that skulk in shadows, using unsettling clicks to echolocate. Months to years later, the infection fully armors the skull, blinding the host and birthing the iconic clickers, whose faces are entirely overtaken by the fungus, rendering them blind but giving them heightened echolocation abilities. Rarer years-old cases become bloaters or shamblers, hulking brutes shattered in hardened fungus that can hurl spore-filled sacks or emit corrosive clouds, making close combat almost suicidal. And in the deepest quarantine-free zones, horrific abominations such as the Rat King show how multiple long-term hosts can fuse into a single colossal monster. And beyond individual variants, The fungus can even spread across entire environments, connecting infected through a network of tendrils, meaning disturbing one dormant creature might awaken many. And spores lingering in enclosed spaces turn abandoned subways and basements into invisible minefields, forcing survivors to weigh every bullet against the risk of a single inhalation. Maze Runner zombies. In this universe, the zombies are called cranks, humans infected by man-made flare virus that WCKD released after catastrophic solar flares destabilized the world economy. The pathogen attacks the brain's temporal and frontal lobes, sharpening aggression and gnawing away at impulse control. In the early stage 1 and 2 window, victims still look normal and can pass for healthy, which lets the disease spread through blood, saliva, and contaminated water. By stage 3, the cortex has begun to rot, skin lesions darken, eyes film over, and speech devolves into snarls punctuated by lucid flashes of grief. Once the infection crosses the blood-brain barrier completely, in stage 4 and 5, a person becomes a full crank. They are not undead, heart and lungs still function, but pain perception plummets while adrenaline surges, granting sprint speed and the strength to tear through steel grates or punch masonry. Their bodies desiccate under fever, giving them the skeletal, veiny appearance seen in the Scorched Trials film. Cranks hunt by sound and motion, swarming prey in packs that flow over ruined cars and fall in freeway columns, and because they don't decay like corpses, a single city can sustain tens of thousands of them for years. And what makes the flare apocalypse uniquely grim is its graduated timeline. Early stage victims retain reason long enough to feel their sanity peeling away, a torment WCKD exploits by harvesting enzyme-rich blood from the immunes, but each draw only slows, but never reverses, the neural burn, with fewer than 1% of humanity immune and the remaining population either dying of exposure or devolving into cranks. The flare creates a world where survivors must choose between ruthless containment measures and ethically fraught research on children, because every hour wasted on conscience is another hour the virus etches into someone's frontal lobe, speeding their march toward the shrieking, hyper-violent hordes that now rule the Scorch. Return of the Living Dead zombies. These zombies explode every Romero rule. They're created by a military nerve agent called Trioxin 245, accidentally released from mislabeled barrels stored in a Louisville medical supply warehouse. When the gas seeps into a nearby cemetery or wafts sky high in later sequels, it reanimates any dead tissue it touches. But these corpses aren't shuffling or brainless, they sprint up fast, attack in raspy voices, and run with full motor control. Destroying the brain or burning the body or even chopping it to pieces only produces more animated parts, and cremation spreads trioxin in smoke that drifts down as reanimation rain. And what really sets them apart is pain-driven intelligence. The dead remain fully aware of their own decomposition, describing the constant agony of rotting as like your whole body's on fire. Eating fresh human brains momentarily numbs that torment, so they actively hunt living victims with purpose. They use radius to lure more paramedics, ambush rescue crews, and because they don't feel pain, pull off self-mutilating stunts like ripping off their own limbs to crawl through tight spaces, just to keep the chase going. And their strategic thinking turns every rescue attempt into a trap, and every safe zone into an eventual slaughterhouse. The result is cosmic hopelessness. Local authorities try sealing off areas and even nuking infected towns, but that only vaporizes trioxin into the upper atmosphere, guaranteeing the next thunderstorm rains zombies on a new city. There's no cure, no quarantine that sticks, and no headshot solution. The more humanity fights back, the faster it accelerates its own extinction. Marvel zombies. Just think of Marvel characters turned into zombies. That's Marvel Zombies. The outbreak begins on Earth 2149 when an infected century crashes through a dimensional barrier and spreads an extraterrestrial hunger virus. Within hours, every major hero and villain is bitten, dies and reanimates, but crucially retains full intellect and superpowers. The Avengers still wield their shields, the X-Men their mutant gifts, only now those gifts serve one goal: feed. What makes this plague uniquely apocalyptic is its snowballing power curve. A zombified Hulk has limitless strength and an appetite to match. An undead Scarlet Witch can teleport fresh meat straight into the maw of a cosmic-level zombie Wolverine. Even cosmic entities fall. The zombie horde outsmarts. Silver Surfer devours his power cosmic, and fueled by that energy, tears Galactus apart, absorbing his World Eater abilities. In minutes, they leap from planet Hungry to multi-universal apex predators, able to cross the stars under their own power and strip worlds bare in a feeding frenzy. Later storylines like Marvel Zombies 2, 3, and 4, Return, Resurrection, and Marvel Zombies Dead Days show splinter factions wrestling with lingering conscience, or ruthlessly hunting the living across realities like a pack of superpowered locusts. Some infected, like Giant Man and Reed Richards, search for cures only to protect their food supply, while while stray survivors such as Black Panther and Headpool navigate ruins, crawling with god-level cannibals. Black Lantern Corps. They are Necron's army of the dead, reanimated heroes, villains, and civilians whose sole purpose is to snuff out all life and plunge the universe into absolute darkness. Black Power Rings burrow into corpses and reboot their nervous systems, but they don't restore the original souls. Instead, each body becomes a meat puppet driven by Necron's will. The rings translate residual memories and personalities into psychological weapons. When a Black Lantern closes out a victim's heart, the ring converts the bioelectric charge of that sudden feeling into raw energy, reflected as a color flash. Enough harvested hearts power a black battery capable of anchoring Necron in the material plane. The corp's tactical edge is twofold. First, their bodies regenerate from almost any damage unless severed from the ring. And second, conventional lantern constructs pass right through them because the dead sit outside the living emotional spectrum. During the Blackest Night event, rings descend on heroes' graves, resurrecting fallen icons like Martian Manhunter, Aquaman, and even Batman's cloned corpse, provoking their former allies in brutal mind games. Entire planets fall quiet as black rings sweep cemeteries, building an exponential army that threatens the multiverse. Call of Duty Zombies. Call of Duty Zombies mode started life as a goofy post-credits extra in World at War in 2008 and snowballed into its own mythos that now spans World War II bunkers, the moon, ancient Atlantis, pocket dimensions, and even the dark ether itself. The plague begins when Nazi scientists, led by Dr. Richthofen, experiment with element 115, a meteor-borne mineral that can power wonder weapons but also reanimates the tissue. The element rips holes in reality, letting Lovecraft-style apothecans, eldritch keepers, and demonic announcers toy with the timeline. Every map picks up after some catastrophic leak of 115. There is Kino der Toten, Mob of the Dead's Alcatraz loop, so the undead keep cropping up wherever the element is refined, tested, or weaponized. As the mode expanded through the Black Ops trilogy and beyond, so did the undead roster. Standard walkers escalate into round-based bullet sponges, but every few levels, new terrors appear. Hellhounds race through flaming portals, Nova Crawlers explode in poisonous gas, the armored Panzer Soldat fires rockets while clawing you with a grappling hook, and later installments add Lovecraftian giants such as the tree-mounted Margwa, dimension-wrapping abominations, and the skyscraper-tall Orda. Round by round, spawn rates climb, health pools balloon, and only Pack-a-Punch upgraded wonder weapons like the Ray Gun, the Thunder Gun, Staffs of the Ancients, the IE Shockwave, or CRBRS can thin the horde fast enough to survive, and hidden Easter egg quests often requiring ciphers, elemental upgrades, or switching tiny dolls in a new precise order. Unlock narrative cutscenes that advance the saga or literally blow up the map as an escape. And the lore threads all that chaos into an apocalypse on loop. In the Ether timeline, Richthofen, Dempsey, Chekio, and Nikolai bounce through eras, trying to undo the dimensional tears element 115 and Samantha Maxis have ripped on, and their bittersweet finale rewrites reality at the cost of their own existence, only for the separate Dark Ether arc in Black Ops Cold War and Vanguard to reveal new rifts, new operatives, and even nastier zombies. No cure ever sticks. Every timeline ends in sacrifice or temporary containment, and each experiment with 115 inevitably spawns another endless wave, and that perpetual escalation makes COD Zombies a uniquely cyclical, ever-mutating threat where survival is measured not in days, but in how many rounds you can last before the horde inevitably overruns everything. Left 4 Dead Zombies. The threat is the green flu, a fast-acting rabies-like virus that hijacks a victim's adrenal system, wipes out higher reasoning, and leaves only an animal urge to attack the uninfected. They can sprint, climb, and swarm, and they turn within minutes of exposure to bites or contaminated fluids. Once infected populations reach critical mass, they form stampeding hordes that home in on noise or bright light, turning a single gunshot or car alarm into an instant death sentence for the 4 survivors trying to cross and overrun America. The series' signature terror comes from its special infected, each a different mutation of the green flu. The original game introduces the Boomer, a bile-bloated exploder whose vomits blind survivors and summons hordes. There's also the Smoker, a lanky ambusher that reels victims in with a prehensile tongue, the Hunter, a hooded pouncer that pins prey beneath razor claws, the Colossal Tank, a concrete hurling juggernaut, and the eerily passive yet one-shot Deadly Witch. Left 4 Dead 2 adds the Charger, a half-tank battering ram, the Spitter, an acid-spewing area denial unit, and Jockey, a cackling rider that steers survivors into hazards. And what makes these infected uniquely oppressive is the game's AI director, which monitors the team's stress, ammo, and pace, then dynamically spawns commons, specials, and witches to keep tension high. No two runs feel the same. 1 minute you're sprinting through an empty alley, the next you're blind with bile while a tank barrels in. And this orchestration turns the green flu horde into a living, adaptive environment. Less a scripted obstacle than a relentless stress test of communication and composure. Dying Light Zombies. The Harn virus is a mutated rabies, and this influenza hybrid sweeps through the quarantine city of Harran after an ill-fated global athletic event. Infection begins with a bite or exposure to contaminated blood, triggering fever, delirium, and within hours to days, complete loss of higher brain function. Survivors stave off the change by injecting antizin, a scarce antiviral that slows but never cures the pathogen. Once the drug wears off or the host dies, the virus takes over and reanimates the body. And because every inhabitant is already infected, any fatal wound, even a misstep of a rooftop, can add another corpse to the streets. And the virus produces several cases of infected that evolve with time of day. By daylight, the city teems with biters, decaying Romero-style shamblers that launch in groups, and the fresher hyper-agile virals who still have enough muscle control to sprint and climb. Chemical spills and prolonged exposure spawn hulking goons, tank-like demolishers, and explosive bombers, each forcing different parkour or combat tactics. And when the sun sets, UV radiation fades, and the apex predators emerge. Volatiles, blade-jawed nightmares that sprint faster than any human and shred armor in seconds. Only UV flares, trap lights, or dawn's first rays make them retreat, turning night runs into white-knuckle tests of nerve and navigation. Narratively, the infected amplify Dying Light's score loop of risk versus reward. Daytime offers scavenging opportunities but dwindling supplies, and nighttime promises double XP and rare loot at the cost of lethal pursuers and limited visibility. And the virus is thus more than a backdrop. It's a living clock that pressures every decision, from whether to sprint across rooftops for a supply drop to how long to linger in a darkened tunnel before the volatiles catch your scent. Resident Evil Zombies. They originate from the Chi virus, a mutagenic pathogen engineered by the Umbrella Corporation as a military bioweapon. The virus reanimates the tissue, jumpstarts metabolic processes, and overrides higher brain functions, leaving hosts with the urge to feed. A single bite or exposure to contaminated fluids can turn a healthy person into a shuffling corpse in minutes, and airborne leaks such as the infamous Raccoon City outbreak can spiral into full-scale pandemics before containment teams mobilize. Early games and the 2002 film spotlight these classic Romero-style shamblers, but even the slow ones are deceptively sturdy. Unless their brains or spinal cords are destroyed, they'll crawl and claw until every bullet or mashed swing counts. What makes the franchise uniquely terrifying is Umbrella's habit of iterating on its own disaster. Variants like the G virus, C virus, Las Plagas parasite, and mold fungus spawn an entire bestiary of bioorganic weapons. Some remain vaguely zombie-ish, like the Ganados in Resident Evil 4 or Javo in Resident Evil 6, while others mutate into towering tyrants, nemesis pursuers, or spidery lickers with exposed brains and lethal tongues. And these creatures often retain rudimentary intelligence or are outright programmed to wield weapons, stalk specific targets, or shrug off small arms fire, forcing protagonists to scrounge for acid rounds, magnum ammo, or environmental hazards just to survive. Every new viral strain represents an arms race escalation, turning once safe laboratories, police stations, and villages into mazes of ethical failure. And the zombies themselves become environmental puzzles, blockades to reroute, threats to freeze or burn, or timed obstacles that pressure resource management. Dead Space Zombies. They are called Necromorphs, hideous corpses reanimated and grotesquely reshaped by the alien signal of an artifact known as the Marker. When humans, or any sizable life form, die within range of the marker's electromagnetic field, microscopic recombinator organisms flood the body, rewriting its DNA in minutes. Bones split into psych plates, organs liquefy into fuel, and flesh stretches into claws or tentacles. The result is a creature that's neither living nor dead. It has no viral organs to destroy, feels no pain, and exists for one purpose: convert more flesh. Necromorphs escalate in complexity as fresh biomass piles up. Infection forms burst into needle crawlers that dart into wounds and pilot corpses from the inside. The most common battlefield threats are slashers, spindly bipeds whose arm blades can shear steel, and leapers, torsos refitted with scorpion tails that bounce across zero-G hangars. And when herds of dead bodies accumulate, as on the USG Ishimura or the Sprawl, the parasite skips skeletons altogether and grows bespoke war machines, brutes with rhinoplating, wall-fused guardians that spawn more infectors, and entire city block megamasses like the Hive Mind or Brethren Moon, each acting as a neural hub for everything it has absorbed. What truly magnifies the horror is the marker's hive mind signal. Every severed limb and every twitching corpse remains psychically linked. Kill a necromorph the wrong way, and its loose parts may scuttle off to fuse into something worse. The marker also projects hallucinogenic visions, luring survivors toward their own deaths and ensuring fresh materials for the swarm. Conventional firearms mostly fail, as headshots do nothing, so the only reliable tactic is strategic dismemberment, shearing off bladed limbs with industrial tools like Isaac Clarke's plasma cutter. Even then, the severed pieces remain dangerous until pulped or incinerated, and a single surviving infector can reignite the outbreak in hours. World War Z zombies. The zombie plague, often called Solanum in expanded lore, begins as a mysterious viral outbreak that reanimates the dead within minutes of a bite. The infection halts decomposition, floods the victim's system with adrenaline-like compounds, and overrides higher brain functions, leaving only a primal drive to feed and spread the virus. And because transmission is almost instantaneous, and any mammal with sufficient body mass can reanimate, the contagion races across continents before governments grasp its scope, turning routine medical emergencies and panicked evacuations into cascading flashpoints of chaos. Max Brooks' original novel portrays these zombies as classic Romero-style shamblers, slow, silent, and relentless. And their menace comes from overwhelming numbers and the fact that they don't tire, feel pain, or drown. They simply accumulate at choke points, like bridges, fences, and rooftops, until weight and persistence bring defenses down. And the 2013 film adaptation amplifies the threat by making the infected hyperfast and hive-like, and these sprinting zombies swarm en masse, forming writing anthills that let them scale walls or topple barricades in seconds. The 28 Days Later zombies. The threat isn't the undead at all. It's living people hijacked by the rage virus, an engineered strain of monkey-borne, hemorrhagic fever that amplifies aggression to the point of mindless savagery. Transmission is brutally fast. A droplet of blood or saliva in the eye, or an open cut, can turn a victim in as little as 10 or 20 seconds. And because the infected are still alive, their heart pumps, their muscles work at full capacity, and they don't decompose, giving them stamina and strength far beyond Romero-style zombies. Physically, rage victims sprint, climb, and hurl themselves through glass or fire with zero self-preservation, propelled by a constant adrenal surge. Their eyes flood with blood, their veins darken, and they communicate only through guttural screams. And lacking higher cognition, they don't use tools or strategize, but their sheer speed and pack mentality let them overwhelm police lines, military cordons, and fortified safe houses within minutes. And even a single infected loose in a crowded space can snowball into a citywide collapse before authorities have time to quarantine an area. Narratively, the rage virus reframes the zombie genre around contagion, speed, and moral panic, rather than the slow creep of the undead. And the films drive home that civilization's thin veneer shatters faster than the virus spreads. Military units turn on refugees, families are torn apart in seconds, and ethical lines blur under constant fear. Half-Life Alyx zombies. The zombies you encounter are living humans and vortigonts whose bodies have been overtaken by parasitic headcrabs, starfish-shaped aliens that latch onto a host's skull, pierce the brainstem, and hijack the nervous system. The host is kept technically alive, but loses all autonomy, shambling with broken kinematics, while the headcrab's probing legs jut through torn clothing. And because the parasite also excretes a neurotoxin that numbs pain and stiffens muscles, the resulting creature can keep moving after taking revolver rounds or losing entire limbs. Alyx introduces 3 major headcrab species, each creating a distinct flavor of corpse puppet. Standard headcrabs are pale and fleshy. The zombies they make can sprint short bursts and will claw and bite if you get too close. Armored heavy headcrabs grow shells that deflect pistol fire. Their zombies shuffle slower, but soak up ammo unless you exploit weak spots under the shell. Most dreaded are poison headcrabs, inky black with twitching spines. When one of these attaches, the zombie's chest cavity descends into a purple toxin sac. Later chapters add lightning dogs or revivers, electrified headcrabs that animate corpses into crackling, franken zombies, turning dark subway cars into strobe lit traps that punish sloppy flashlight work. The zombies from Plant vs. Zombies. The undead here work less like a virus and more like an organized marching band of ghouls. At their simplest, you have the shambling basic zombie, slow, single-lane intruders who spend their brain hunger mostly face planting into walnuts. But PopCap's design twist is that each upgrade in zombie wardrobe equals a jump in durability or gimmick. Donate traffic cone and you're a cone-head zombie with triple health. Swap for a bucket and you're practically wearing a medieval helm. From there the roster gets absurdly specialized. Screen door zombies carry riot shields that block P-shots until a fume shroom's gas corrodes them. Ladder zombies neutralize your plant wall by literally climbing over it. And balloon zombies float above every projectile until a cactus or blower pops their ride. Night stages introduce Gravebuster, guarded tombstones that spawn surprise undead in your backline, while pool levels add Dolphin Rider zombies that leap over lily pads and torpedo your squash traps. Roof stages pitch the angles steep enough that only lobbers like Kabash bolts can clear them. Just as bungee zombies rappel from above to kidnap a beloved repeater you forgot to umbrella protect. At the top of the food chain looms the Gargantuar, screen-filling brute that soaks entire volleys before smashing plants and hurling a smashing imp over your last defenses. And of course Dr. Zombos, the mad mastermind in a Zombot mech, arrives with fireballs, ice balls, and a wrecking crane in a finale that mashes every prior mechanic into one frenetic boss fight. And what makes these zombies deadly isn't speed or gore, but synergy. A balloon scout distracts your air defense, letting a digger zombie tunnel under a true sunflowers from the rear, while a football zombie blitzes up front behind a screen door phalanx. Success in PvZ is therefore a constant calculus of sun economy, recharge timers, and lane-specific counters. Miss one rhythm and misjudge which quirky corpse is lurking next, and those goofy groans quickly crescendo into the zombies ate your brain's game over text. Project Zomboid Zombies. The undead aren't cosmic horrors or lab-bred mutants. They are depressingly ordinary people whose slow, inevitable advance mirrors the game's core promise. This is how you died. The virus underlying the outbreak is never fully explained, only that a bite, or less commonly a deep scratch, carries a 100% fatal infection that kills within a day or two before reanimating the victim. Once turned, zombies shuffle with stiff, Romero-style gait, but their threat scales with context. They form huge hordes in towns, linger as lone wanderers on back roads, and cascade toward any loud noise like alarms, gunshots, or even a clattering cooking pan. A single zombie is manageable, yet numbers escalate brutally. Smashed windows luring straggles, panicked gunfire snowballs into a migrating horde that can blanket a neighborhood, and because zombies have no stamina limit, they'll pound on doors for hours, eventually breaking through if you don't reinforce with planks or metal sheets. Line of sight matters, duck behind fences or crouch in tall grass and they'll lose track. But get cornered in a tight hallway, and even a 3-zombie scrum can become lethal due to grab mechanics that pin you while others bite. What sets Project Zomboid apart is its sandbox mutability. Lore presets let you toggle shamblers, fast shamblers, or sprinters, adjust infection mortality from instant to weeks, and even turn bites non-lethal for a survivor's guilt experience. Late game decay mechanics make surviving months feel different than day one. Zombies clothed in tatters, reducing bite protection, their flesh rots, slightly lowering vision, and winter drives them into buildings, creating indoor death traps just when food stocks are running low. Modders add variants, crawler heavy worlds, night vision Zeds, snow shrouded sprinters, so each run can pivot, from slow burn survival sim to pulse pounding chase thriller. But no matter the settings, the design philosophy stays grimly constant. The zombies don't scale to you, you scale to them. Train to Busan. The outbreak begins with a secret chemical leak at a biotech facility. But the film never dwells on the exact science. What matters is speed. Victims turn in under a minute, their bodies snapping and contorting as the virus hijacks their nervous system. And because the infection spreads through bites and blood spray, any cramped environment, like say a train, becomes a pressure cooker where one misstep snowballs into a full car massacre. Physically, these zombies are pure kinetic terror. They sprint, hurl themselves through windows, and contort their limbs in ways that feel both insect-like and disturbingly human. And their senses are sight and sound-based. Once they lose visual contact, such as when a door is shut or a tunnel plunges the train into darkness, they mill around confused, giving survivors slim windows to sneak past. In daylight though, they are relentless, piling over each other in narrow aisles or dogpiling on doors until metal groans and glass gives away. And beyond the visceral action set pieces, Train to Busan uses its zombies to turn a symbol of modern convenience, the high-speed KTX line, into a claustrophobic gauntlet, and the undead force passengers to confront social hierarchies and moral choices. Who gets barricaded out, who gets rescued, and who's deemed expendable. The girl with all the gift zombies. The apocalypse begins when a mutated strain of Ophiocordyceps, a real parasitic fungus that hijacks insect bodies, jumps to humans. The infection spreads by bites or contact with body fluids, warming tendrils through the nervous system within minutes. Once seized, a victim becomes a hungry, driven by pure predatory instinct. Cities fall in days, and what's left of the UK retreats behind fortified enclaves, while the countryside turns into a quiet, overgrown graveyard stalked by feral packs. Physically, Hungries combine the worst traits of zombies and pack animals. They are gaunt but incredibly fast, sprinting at prey the moment they catch a whiff of live flesh. Their sense of smell is razor keen, but they ignore anything that doesn't move. Over time, fungal plates erupt from their faces and torsos, hardening into natural armor. When a Hungry's body mass is exhausted, the cordyceps forces it to root into the ground like a macabre flower stalk, and these stationary spore trees eventually burst, releasing clouds of infectious dust powerful enough to blanket entire population centers into a single gust of wind. And the story's most chilling innovation is the second-generation Hungries, children infected in the womb after the collapse. Unlike their feral parents, they retain full intelligence and emotions, while still craving human flesh. Protagonist Melanie and her cohort can speak, reason, and even feel love, yet the hunger never fades, hinting that they represent the planet's next dominant species. And by the novel's end, Melanie's choice to unleash the massive spore trees ensures the fungus will sweep the globe, dooming the remnants of uninfected humanity, but granting her kind a world where intellect and instinct coexist in a new, fungal-human hybrid future. I Am Legend Zombies. The apocalypse in I Am Legend begins not with a bite but with medicine gone wrong. Dr. Alyx Crippens, genetically re-engineered measles virus designed to cure cancer, mutates and rips through humanity. Roughly 90% of the world's population die outright, and most of the rest become dark seekers, the film's infected, while a tiny fraction, people like Robert Neville, possess natural immunity. Contagion is near instant by blood or saliva, and within weeks, the social order of every major city implodes, leaving silent streets stalked by supercharged predators that only emerge after sunset. Physiologically, dark seekers are alive, but fundamentally altered. The virus turbo boosts the metabolism and adrenal response, granting them sprint speed, wall-crawling agility, and the strength to hurl bodies across rooms. They hibernate in dark hives, venturing out only when UV levels drop. Autopsies in Neville's basement lab show enlarged adrenal glands and a collapsed immune system that nevertheless regenerates damaged tissue far faster than an uninfected humans, and just one scratch can transmit enough viral load to convert a victim within hours. Early in the film they appear feral, but they quickly display pack strategy, mimicking Neville's snare trap, organizing rescue raids, and in the director's cut ending, revealing social bonds strong enough to risk a coordinated assault on Neville's fortified brownstone. In the original novel, the creatures are closer to sentient vampires who can speak, use tools, and build a new society, recasting Neville as the monster of their legends. So whether you treat them as vampires or ultra-fast zombies, the calculus is the same. Once the Crippen virus finds a population center, its combination of hypervirulence, superhuman hosts, and latent cunning makes containment nearly impossible and recovery a race against the extinction of uninfected humanity. The Rising Zombies. Brian Keene's The Rising swaps the conventional virus origin for something far more primal and unsettling. A secret particle accelerator experiment tears open a rift to the void, letting disembodied demons called the Siqqusim pour into our world. And these entities don't just reanimate corpses, they can also possess any recently dead animal or ambush the living and hijack them from the inside out. The moment a Siqqusim slips into a body, the eyes film over, speech becomes guttural and cruel, and the host flesh starts to decay without ever shutting the creature down. Once inside, the Siqqusim retain all of the host's motor skills plus demon intellect. They drive cars, wield firearms, set traps, and coordinate ambushes over long distances by simply talking through the void. Because they feel no pain and don't need vital organs, headshots and dismemberment only slow them until they crawl back together or swap bodies entirely. Worse, every species is on the menu. Deer, birds, dogs, even fish erupt from ponds to attack, turning the entire food chain against humanity. And the Siqqusim's favorite pastime is psychological torture. They'll taunt survivors with memories stolen from the bodies they wear just to savor the terror before the kill. As the novels progress, it becomes clear there's no cure and no safe haven. Major cities fall within days, and the few remaining humans are either hiding underground or running a gauntlet of possessed wildlife and sadistic, gun-touching corpses. Keene's apocalypse is bleak even by zombie standards. The world isn't facing a mindless horde but a legion of strategists wearing Rachel masks. Guided by an otherworldly hive mind, that intends to snuff out every last heartbeat simply because, to the Siqquism, life itself is an abomination that must be erased.